Hey everybody, I'm Colin. I lead tokenization for Chainlink and formerly at Centrifuge. So the Real World Asset Summit is near and dear to my heart. Excited to be back and very excited to have these fine panelists with us today. Daniel, let's start with you. We're going to talk a little bit about, I'd like to know, you're obviously leading Tokeny. Tokeny became a part of Apex. Curious to just talk us through at Apex, how is your organization thinking about tokenization, and given kind of Apex's background, how you're thinking about bringing that into the on-chain ecosystem that we have here?
Well, the first thing that we have discussed when I joined Apex is to stop talking about tokenization. Tokenization is a capability that doesn't exist as a product itself, but more as a feature that we want to bring into the existing product line of Apex. So being a closed-ended fund, open-ended fund, stablecoin may be more relevant, but it doesn't change the nature of the asset, right? An open-ended fund remains an open-ended fund even if it's tokenized. So we have agreed that let's look at the infrastructure play, let's look at tokenization as a feature that we should plug into any assets and create a representation on-chain of that asset on demand. Not everyone needs to have a token. You know, if I invest in a private fund that has 5 years lifetime, I'm a passive investor. Why would I need a token, right? I'm going to wait 5 years, get my investment back. I may want to have a token to see a consolidated view of my portfolio in an app, but other than that, I'm not interested. If I want have access to secondary because it's taking too long for the fund to liquidate, or if I want to characterize my interest, I should be able to request my token, right? That's how we see tokenization. That's what we're implementing at Apex.
Keerthi, JP Morgan, no stranger to tokenization. You've been there a while. How is JP Morgan thinking about tokenization? Where does it sit? Where are you in your journey right now, given all that's happening?
Yeah, for sure. So yes, we have been on this journey for a long time with the blockchain space itself since 2015 and the tokenization space since 2018. And I think, this year, even looking back at the announcements over the last couple of weeks with the launch of JPMD, it's clear that we're at a pivotal point in our journey and able to take all of the learnings and all the infrastructure that we've built around tokenization over those last 6-7 years and actually start to deploy them across public ecosystems as well. The name of the game with tokenization for us has always been around solving our very real problems through the advent and integration of blockchain solutions or token-based solutions, thinking about not just the idea of launching the token and expecting a market to follow, but actually, again, solving for things like driving more efficiencies around settlement timings and orchestration, or driving for 24/7 movement of funds and of assets. And now I think we're really excited to see that bridge into the public space as well with our institutional client base alongside us.
Now, Paul-Adrien, Spiko, you've been interacting on public chains for quite some time. Talk to us a little bit, these are larger organizations. We were just talking about the size of your team versus maybe the size of a JP Morgan Kinexys. Where does, the journey you've been on, tell us a little bit about where you all are and where you're thinking about it next for tokenization.
It's working. So basically, we launched at Spiko a year ago the first UCITS money market funds on-chain. UCITS is for those who don't know, it's the European Union equivalent of the US mutual funds setup framework. And the funds we launched are, as you said, 100% on-chain. All the fund shares are issued as tokens on public blockchains. And the reason why we chose to launch on public blockchains is for two reasons mostly. One is transparency, and the other one is transferability. Transparency because by tokenizing the shareholder register, you give a read access to anyone on the register. And when it comes to money market funds, having a real-time view on the investor concentration of the vehicle you basically allocate cash to is quite valuable for capital allocators. The second one, as I mentioned, is transferability. The fact of operating on a global infrastructure live 24/7 creates value when it comes to tokenizing the fund shares and transferring the fund shares. That's the main reasons. At the moment, we have $400 million in assets under management, and we are trying to bridge the gap between the US money market fund industry, which is sort of 10 times larger than the European money market fund industry. And to do that, we use public blockchains, which are a better infrastructure in our view.
Got it. Now, if we're Keerthi, I want to come to you on this one and just kind of start from the institutional view. There's a lot of different components that enable an institution to do this at scale. And I'm sure, given your time at Kinexys, you all have looked at different pieces of this puzzle, right? It could be compliance, it could be some of the other pieces that are critical. Given where we are in the cycle or in the journey at Kinexys, what are some of the things that are critical for JP Morgan, Kinexys, or your clients to enable this thing to really unlock its scale?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, again, like when we have looked at the tokenization space, as I mentioned earlier, it's always been around solving sort of like the traditional problems with the use of tokenization. And what comes with that are two things that we have to like reconcile with. The first is that a lot of our clients are accustomed to interacting with their assets in a particular way already, whether that's through their existing, broker-dealer channels, whether that's through their existing order management systems, whether that's through their existing execution venues. When it comes to operating at scale, it's really important for our clients to be able to plug in their activities with securities or other types of assets or cash into their existing processes for how they both record and risk manage their assets. So I think one big thing that we've had to think through across our years of development, as well as what we'll have to think through even when we're interacting with public ecosystems as well, is how do we ensure that bridging between legacy infrastructure and on-chain infrastructure continues to proliferate across the ecosystem, both through our own work as well as the work of our clients and partners as well. So that's definitely one piece of it. I think the other two pieces that we think about quite a bit, one centers around identity and thinking about scalable forms of on-chain identity. And Dan and I were actually just talking through sort of like the different mechanisms that have come to exist in the on-chain sort of like world to date. But I think, again, for our purposes, it's like, with the type of like first steps forward that we're taking in our public chain products, something that works like an allow list probably wouldn't work when we're trying to operate at a much larger scale. So thinking about different forms of achieving identity, whether that's through verifiable credentials or other sorts of like on-chain mechanisms, I think is really important too. And then the last piece, which is one that we have experimented quite a bit with over the last few years, is thinking about different ways of achieving privacy or the preservation of privacy for our clients. Again, it's one thing for a client to invest in one tokenized fund or trade a particular position and be totally fine with that being completely visible on a Block Explorer for everyone to see. It's a completely different question when it comes to like your entire trading strategy across all of your traditional assets being equally as visible and equally as accessible. So I think when we think about scale in the sense of like at what scale does JP Morgan operate in today and bringing that into the on-chain world as well, that's another piece that we'll have to unlock and have to work through.
Daniel, let's come to you next. Thanks for that, Keerthi. Just given the size of like JP Morgan, right, and then Apex, right, I guess I would retool the question just a little bit. What's critical to Apex at this moment right now, like specific to the Apex business for critical infrastructure for y'all?
Well, what is critical for us is what is critical for everyone. It's adoption. We've been playing in the space for previous time with Tokeny, and same for you for between 8 and 10 years. So, and this is a journey, right? It's great to hear all those folks talking about liquidity and all the markets is developing, but most of those people are looking at crypto. Instruments that are not regulated, that have liquidity because you're dealing with instruments that are liquid. It's like trading USD or Euro, they are liquid. You go on any exchange, you have liquidity, right? If we start dealing with regulated instruments, that's a different game. First, you need to have fund administrator, fund servicer that needs to be in control of the assets. So if you don't implement the technology at the level of the asset servicers, there's no way that you can issue a tokenized fund because they cannot ensure the control of that instrument, verify KYC, AML, etc. That means that they cannot operate as per the mandate they've received from the asset managers. And that's just an example of the journey in order to create a representation of that asset on chain to have the third party servicing them, and then creating the value for the investors, because here we're talking mostly about operation efficiency, which is great, but then we have to focus also on delivering the value to the investors. So the key question, what really keeps us busy now, is how do you do that at scale? How do we implement that technology at scale? And one thing that we have been doing kind of behind the scene for the last 2 years at Tokeny was to plug into fund accounting system. Because it's great to do one fund, and kudos to Securitize, BlackRock, Biddle. This is an amazing success, but it's one fund with 12 investors, right? Apex operate 30,000 funds for 14,000 investors. How do you implement that at scale? So you need to have solution to automate the issuance. You need to have solution to automate the compliance. What we've been announcing yesterday with Chainlink, implementing the automatic compliance engine, together, by the way, with Glyph, hello Alex, linking that with a proper identity solution so that you can reference those assets into existing traditional banking system, like Olympus. You need an ISIN code to reference that asset into a banking application. So if you don't leverage the way that you identify those assets, that you enforce compliance 24/7, you're never going to achieve liquidity. So scale, working with all the participants, all the building blocks, fund accounting, fund administrator, numbering agencies, automatic compliance, Oracle, protocol, all this value chain needs to coexist and work together. It is not the winner takes it all. Sorry to say that, but one party cannot win in the business by itself. So we need to work together in industry, building standards together and implementing solutions that will enable indeed to handle those assets at scale. Liquidity in private asset will come with scale, not from a single asset.
Thank you. Paul-Adrien, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, maybe one additional point on regulations and the need for more regulatory clarity, because and I think this is especially true, it's probably true in the US, but especially true in Europe, because when it comes to securities law, there is a big lack of harmonization across the European Union. Securities law is national, so the tokenization framework that is in place in France is different from the one that is in place in Luxembourg, Ireland, etc., etc. And when you get into the details of what it means to actually tokenize a security, if you want to do it properly, so the security being the actual security and not just a wrapper or derivative on top of the securities that is off-chain, then you get into a lot of complexities. And that is not even mentioning the listing space. At the moment, we don't even have a legislation in the European Union that allows for the creation of and the listing of tokenized securities at scale. There is a sandbox, which is called the pilot regime, but it's a temporary regulation. There are caps. So it's really not something that can actually scale at this point in time. So a lot of work, I think, to be done in terms of harmonizing regulations at the European Union level and also enabling tokenization of listed securities. If you want tokenized ETFs at scale, this sort of stuff, a lot is not possible, at least from a regulatory standpoint at the moment. And this is clearly something that is slowing things down a lot.
There is some complexity, but I want to draw attention to a report that has been, or report a note that's been published by ESMA a couple of days ago that says that a security is a security, no matter what infrastructure you represent it. That was already the case in Luxembourg. The Luxembourg government and regulation is very agnostic to the type of underlying infrastructure you use. ESMA, again, made the statement that you can pick up the technology you want. So you're free to represent your security on-chain as long as you enforce control and compliance and the regulatory framework around that security. This node will be submitted to the European Parliament. We wait to see the response from the European Parliament, but that means that public chain is a suitable infrastructure to issue securities. Now, there are indeed some specific requirements. If, for example, you want to custody the representation of the asset, you need a CASP license. Yes, that's inherent to the technology itself, but you can issue today security on public chain.
Very helpful. Paul-Adrien, I want to kind of pivot now into maybe more the deployment side, the integration side, right? So starting with you, talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you've learned as you've gone through the integration process, building Spiko, either when you've thought about engaging users, driving liquidity, getting utility on chain for some of the money market funds that Spiko's representing, or if you think about the conversation we just had about some of the critical pieces of infrastructure, integrating legacy systems, right? What are some of the key learnings that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, so I mean, from my point of view, the integrations with the legacy system has not been too difficult, honestly. At Spiko, we are trying to address one very specific problem, which is basically providing a super easy access to money market funds in Europe, which is maybe for our US friends a bit strange, but not a commodity at this point in time. If you are an individual, if you're a small company, if you're a fintech and you go to your bank, you ask for access to a money market funds, in most cases, that won't be possible. They will nudge you towards term deposits, towards structured products, etc., etc. And we decided to build new money market funds, basically from the ground up, and to select the best technology to do that. So for us, it was public blockchain when it came down to the shareholder register and how we would operate the transfer agent infrastructure. Then it was an API to facilitate access to the fund, subscriptions, redemptions, all this stuff. And then stablecoins. And that's a point that I would like to highlight. Today, most of the subscriptions and redemptions still go through the traditional fiat settlement system. So SEPA when it comes to domestic transfers in the EU, SWIFT when it comes to international transfers. This is long and this is costly. So the next frontier is using tokenized e-money instead of traditional fiat and settling everything on the blockchain. And this, to your point, Colin, is not that easy because if you want to do it properly, you need your depository bank, your custodian bank to have wallets and to be able to operate wallets in addition to traditional bank accounts. Most of them are still not equipped or not ready to go into production on this sort of stuff. And there are also a bit of regulatory uncertainties in some jurisdictions when it comes to what is a stablecoin. So we're discussing the Genius Act in the US at the moment. So we don't really know till the act passes what a stablecoin is. In Europe, we have MiCA, but MiCA is sort of ambiguous. On the one hand, it's a crypto asset. On the other hand, it's e-money. So I think there's a bit of work to be done also, and you know, regulatory clarity to have on just clarifying the fact, to your point, Daniel, that a stablecoin is a form of e-money. It's e-money. It's using a blockchain, but it's e-money at the end of the day. Just like a tokenized security using a blockchain for the register is just a tokenized, just a security as any other.
Daniel, your thoughts?
What was the question again?
When you look at the moving just from the integration side, right, or from like the infrastructure that's important to the actual integration that has to be done, when you're thinking about the integration work that you all have to do to actually make this successful, whether that be more of the Web3 tooling or existing integrations with the legacy systems, what's a key learning that you've had?
Over the long term, I think that, first of all, yes, everything will be tokenized because I spent 10 years at Clearstream. I worked for CSD, understanding the pipe and how we represent assets. It should be obvious to everyone that the moment that you remove all the silos and everyone operate on a single infrastructure, this is a game changer. It's going to be a world of apps that will provide value to those assets, and you will be gateway being asset servicers and others. Today, someone was mentioning, by the way, that I think it's a guy from Coinbase that asset servicers will disappear. No, they will not disappear because regulated instruments need asset servicers to control those assets. The rule will change, the business model will change, they will not disappear. But there will be a world of application that will create value for those assets, and you will get gatekeepers that will allow to access the investor data or the assets. To make that happen, we need standards. And I know everybody's talking about standards, and every week I hear a new standard. This is, sorry, pisses me off. We worked for 8 years to build a standard, the ERC 3643, and I agree the identity part could be improved, but we did that 8 years ago when there was nothing, so bear with us. Look at R3, 8 years ago, what they did. So yes, we did what we could at that time, but now we have, one of the only official standard of Ethereum that went to final stage. So it's fully open source. We have 140 members now in a nonprofit association where Tokeny Apex is one vote. So we're not driving this forward now, right? So we want this industry to drive this forward. And we have members from the whole industry. We have wallet infrastructure, we have Fireblocks, we have DFNS, we have all the networks, we have Arbitrum, we have Polygon, we have, name it, right? We have Zinco, we have AMA, we have, of course, Chainlink, CCIP, we have Wormhole, we have, so why? Because those applications will not exist if we don't provide a framework for the token to exist amongst those applications. And part of the reason why we made this collaboration with Chainlink is also to enforce this compliance across all those tokens, across all those infrastructure, across all those applications, because it will not be possible for any asset servicer, no matter how big they are, to enforce that in every local jurisdiction where those tokens will be issued, distributed, and plugged into whatever liquidity solution that will enhance the yield to those assets. So standardization is key, and yes, what we did with the RC3643 maybe not the best solution. It can still be improved, but if we work together as an industry to improve it, to build on the top of that, instead of replicating every week a new standard, then we can achieve the critical mass that the industry needs.
Thank you.
I have a take on this question as well, because
Oh, I was coming to you next, so.
well, dealing with legacy system integrations has been like part of the job for the last like 7-8 years. And I think my take is probably one that sounds really obvious, but it's something we feel very deeply, which is there's no driver quite like demand. And the more and more that there are traditional products issued on-chain with features that you could not typically access off-chain, like the ability to exit a fund at any hour of the day, irrespective of where you're at, the more traditional institutions will start to feel that pressure of demand from their client bases who want to access the on-chain product because it has the same risk profile as the off-chain product, but with more features or more things that they can do with it or more utilities. And that will drive the legacy system integration work that needs to be done. Because if you think about the large mass of institutions that are out there and their very extensive roadmaps that already exist to deal with their traditional client bases, to deal with changing regulation, to deal with all the things that they normally deal with, feeling the pressure from their clients that they want to access this new sort of plethora of on-chain products that are being issued through Apex or issued through Hyppolite. I think that is really going to be the piece that's necessary in order for those legacy systems and operators of those systems to choose to integrate with on-chain products as well.
I agree. And so with the little time we have left, we're going to start with you, Keerthi, and come back this way. When we think about, you talked about JPMD, right? That's a pretty big milestone. But as we look out and we think about institution, there is no driver like demand, right? Like you said. What are the next milestones for us in the institutional journey that we've been on, right? What are going to be the next things from your view that really will indicate that demand on-chain, that institutions, the traditional organizations, their hand's going to be forced. This is going to be kind of those steps in the right direction that signal to the audience here, or to the market broadly, that we're making the steps in the timeline that we want to make them.
So I thought long and hard about this question once you sent it via email. And I think, I've always seen it, or have maybe not articulated it this way, but see it through three sort of views. The first is something that I think the entire market can look at and be oh, that's we're here. And I think since 2018, we're if at some point there's a major sort of again, I don't know, prediction, major IPO that's underwritten by traditional underwriters but distributed entirely on a public chain, to me, that's a very large milestone that we are here, we have arrived, people want tokenized assets on public chains. So that's one piece. I think the second, which is perhaps less visible to the wider market, but anecdotally would be very telling to our team at JP Morgan, would be the level of conversation that we have with clients. If it's less around hey, what does tokenization mean, and what does it mean for me to hold this tokenized product, and what does it mean for me to, what infrastructure do I need, what additional documents do I need, and it becomes more just part of the conversation about the products that they're trying to access. So like less education and more just, this is the way in which we do business. That's another indicator and another like major milestone that I think indicates that like, again, we're here and adoption is here. And then the third thing, which is my, again, personal view, is I think the minute you start seeing the traditional institutions also leveraging and also utilizing constructs within DeFi to provide liquidity out to clients and pairing that as part of their strategies to provide more of like a holistic sort of solution to like their different activities, that's the third indicator to me. And in no particular order do I expect any of those things to happen, but those are the milestones I look out for.
Daniel, then Paul-Adrien.
Well, first, I think that we need to be reasonable with expectations. As I said, we're not dealing with crypto instruments. We'll regulate it. So the fact that we see what's happening in crypto create an expectation and lead us to believe there's no demand. There is demand, but there is a stage where we need to achieve for the technology to mature enough so that it become easy to access, and then we will see the first application deliver value, etc. I just want to highlight that with one example. We all have mobile phones, right? Maybe for those who are old enough like me, in the beginning of roaming, you had to put your GPRS access point in your phone to have data roaming. And everybody was saying, oh, data roaming is not working. No, because it was so complicated for people to put that GPRS access point that nobody was making use of it. And then you had over-the-air provisioning. When you travel, now you roam, you don't have to put that access point. Everybody's roaming. I think we need to come to a certain point with the usability of the technology to remove that perceived complexity. We will have a couple of use cases demonstrating why we have to do it, and then you're going to hit the tipping point, and that's it.
Final thought.
Yeah, I think to conclude, I would say that it's a bottom-up journey. Like crypto started as a sort of retail fringe movement. Now we are talking about tokenization, institutions and stuff, and it's changing pretty fast. In our case, the first tokenized money market funds in Europe was launched by a startup, Spiko. So start small, and then gradually I think the institutions will join. In our view, that's exactly what we are doing. We are now focused on small companies, then we'll go mid-market, enterprise, et cetera, and it's a journey.
Wonderful. Thank you all for your time today. Thank you.